So it's a little afternoon, so we thought we'd go ahead and get started. We wanted to welcome all of you to our introduction session, How to Find a Judicial Externship. My name is Leo Ornetta. I work in the Career Services Office. I'm the Assistant Director of Public Interest Programs. And this is my colleague, Susanna Rodowitz.
I'm the Associate Dean for Law Career Services, and Leo and I co-teach the Judicial Externship course. And so we wear lots of hats, and this is one of the other hats that we wear. And so we're here to talk to you today about what judicial externships are. If you like what you hear, then to give you some tips about how to apply, some of the considerations you might think about when choosing among the different opportunities. And then we'll talk a little bit about the resources and the application process.
Before we start out, I thought we would take a brief poll of the room. If you are a 1L, could you please raise your hand? Most of the room. Anybody who's a second year? One? Third years? Okay. Any HLP students? Anybody thinking of applying to HLP? Okay. So that will really help us in terms of framing our message for this class. Thank you for giving us that information. To start off, I thought we would just give you a brief overview of what it means to work for a judge. And from a very basic standpoint, working for a judge gives you an incredible, invaluable, sort of almost irreplaceable opportunity to engage in legal analysis and to write and to create legal writing. Moreover, it gives you opportunities to observe court proceedings and really see how a lot of lawyers act in a courtroom. You get the chance to really sort of shadow a lot of lawyers because you get to see them come in and out of the courtroom and see how they respond and see what you like, see what you don't like. It gives you the opportunity to develop incredible skills that you're going to use in literally every possible legal setting that you'll come across in your career. For many, if not most people who work for judges, it also gives you the opportunity to network. People have found that by working for a judge, to the extent they do a good job, that judge has sort of taken them under their wing and introduced them to other attorneys and lawyers and people who work within the community to connect them with other options and career opportunities down the road. Moreover, because you sort of get to go behind the curtain and kind of see how the sausage gets made, so to speak, you get to build a lot of confidence in terms of how to present in court. That it sort of de-shrouds the mystery of what it means to be in a courtroom and how to act and how to appear before a judge. Because public interest is my particular wheelhouse, I'll also say that a lot of public interest employers think look very favorably on people who've had judicial externships because that means that they've really had a strong opportunity to develop these skills, and a lot of employers talk to me about that and the importance of that experience.
Yeah, these are great opportunities. They're prestigious. They look nice on your resume. And regardless of whatever path you're considering, this is a really good training ground, whether you want to represent commercial clients, nonprofit clients, it doesn't matter. The skills that you develop at an externship are really, really invaluable. And one of the things that surprises students when they start their judicial externships is that they're doing real work. The courts have come to rely on students to help them, manage their caseload. And so typically you are doing writing, you're doing research, you're doing analysis on cases that are pending before that particular court. And the judge can't be in all places at all times, and so it needs you to be kind of an extension of them doing the research, looking at all the files and papers submitted by the parties, and to help analyze what's going on here, who's articulated the law appropriately, who does the moving party meet their burden of proof, or should the opposing party prevail, and you have to do that analysis and make those recommendations to the court or to the judge. And so this is great training for whatever you want to do, and the courts really rely on students and value the contributions of the students in their chambers. So there are a lot of different opportunities that you can consider when working for a court, and so I wanted to give you kind of an overview of these. I will say most of the courts in the Bay Area take externs, and very few of them actually post a job announcement. occasionally they do. So you do want to keep your eye on LCS Online, because if a judge does announce an opportunity, you certainly want to be in a position to jump on it. But otherwise, you want to just take the initiative and apply to whichever opportunities are interesting to you. And we'll talk later today about that application process. But this is one of those times when it's appropriate to just send applications in. I'll sketch, well, actually, before I sketch things out, is anyone here considering an opportunity not in the Bay Area? Okay. So for those of you looking for opportunities outside of the Bay Area, a lot of what we talk about today will still hold true just in terms of the different levels of the court. We do have resources at LCS, different court directories that are national directories, and so we can help you identify judges in particular locations that you might be interested in. If you're thinking about, well, actually, if you're one of those, you won't be able to do for academic credit, so that we don't have to worry about that right now. But anyway, for those of you who are looking outside of the Bay Area, come chat with us, and we can give you some direction there. But right now, what I want to do is highlight for those of you who are planning to be here the many, many opportunities right here in the Bay Area. And we're really quite lucky to be here because there are so many court opportunities, both in the state level, state scheme and the federal scheme, and at all three levels of court. So if you want to follow along with this yellow sheet, and I'm going to just kind of walk you through what's out there, just so you have some ideas, and we've given you some of the court web addresses so you can do some additional research to get a sense of the different courts and the judges. So if you just do mute off. There we go. So there we are. So let's see, we're going to start on the federal side because those, we'll just start there on the federal side, and this will have application to all of you, regardless of the geographic market you guys might want to be in. And so if you're looking on your yellow sheet, we'll sort of work our way up here on this column. So starting with the trial court, these are probably the most common kinds of judicial externships, and those are working for a trial judge at the federal court. There are two kinds of trial judges at federal court. There are the district judges, and those are the sort of Article 3 appointed by the president, lifetime appointment type federal judges that we all know about. And these are very prestigious opportunities. There are also magistrate judges, and the magistrates are hired by the court to serve as a judicial officer for the court, and the court delegates to the magistrates almost all of the same authority that the district judges have. And they too provide a very excellent experience to students. And so I encourage you, if you're looking for an externship at district court, to consider both the magistrate judges as well as the district judges. So what is the experience like? If you're working at federal court, you would apply directly to a judge's chambers, and you would be supervised by that judge's law clerks, who are attorneys who work for the judge. And so what's nice about it is that they are very accustomed to hiring students. They have students every semester, and they're typically two staff attorneys who can supervise you. They give you assignments. They are the person you would go to if you have questions. They serve as a buffer between you and the judge tends to be very busy, and so if you're a little nervous, while this is your first experience, you'd like to have someone you could go to say, does this look right? It's a little nice to have an attorney that you can go to for those initial questions without having to go to the federal judge and say, does this look right? Because you kind of want things to look right by the time you're showing it to the judge. So we find that these tend to be very thoughtful experiences. The pace is nice at district court. Students are busy, but they tend not to be too busy. They have time to think about their assignments, but not get lost in their assignments. And so it seems to be a nice balance for a lot of students. So as I suggested earlier, you are helping the judge and the judge's clerks review cases or review matters that are before the judge. And so they might, maybe they're working on a big motion, they might delegate to you a couple of the arguments presented by the parties and say, we're not sure about this, please go do some research and come back to us with your recommendations. And so you would do that research, you would review the papers submitted by the parties, you would prepare a memo to the judge saying, here's what the parties want, I recommend you do this, and for these reasons, and you use that lovely format that you learned in your writing and research class for how to present your analysis. And so that's essentially what the job is. And then the judge may say, I agree, your analysis is impeccable, please take that memorandum and convert it to an order that I can use, and so that the judge would then sign this order and present that to the parties, saying, here's how I rule in this matter. So you're learning different styles of writing and different styles of analysis. You'll likely see civil and criminal cases at the federal level. You'll see cases dealing with federal law, but as you know, you might also see cases that are their diversity jurisdiction, so you might also see cases dealing with state law. Federal judges do not specialize. They get assigned cases as they come in, so you're likely to see a broad spectrum of things. So if you don't know yet what kind of work you want to do, or if you know what you want to do and that area of law is governed by federal law, then working at the federal court is a great place to be, whether it's for a magistrate or a district judge. The magistrates do a few things that the district judges don't do. So the magistrates get assigned their own cases, just like the district judges. And then in addition, they are referred, the district judges might refer matters to them. So they might do a lot of pretrial hearings for the other judges. And they also do settlement conferences for the other judges. So, and you don't see the settlement conferences if you're working for a district judge. So for those of you who have an interest in settlement conferences and alternative dispute resolution, you might find the working for a magistrate is very engaging because you have access to settlement conferences. Yeah.
What about commissioners versus judges?
So commissioners are on the state level, and we'll talk about those in a minute. Thanks. So that's at the district court. In addition, at the federal level, there's a separate trial court called bankruptcy court. And the bankruptcy judges also hire externs. Those are also a great opportunity for those of you who have an interest in consumer issues or commercial law issues, because the bankruptcy judges are dealing with all kinds of things. And often the areas where they need help from students is not necessarily in the bankruptcy law, because they know that area. Sort of how does bankruptcy law intersect with other areas of law? How do we handle these intellectual property issues if the entity's assets are in the form of patents? Or how do we handle criminal law issues if, you know, the debtor is, you know, being prosecuted for embezzlement or something? You know, I mean, there are all kinds of issues going on, and so often it's the interplay between bankruptcy law and other areas of the law that are so interesting. So I encourage you to look at bankruptcy law as well. In the Bay Area, we have 3 primary federal courts, or in terms of location. So there's the main courthouse here in San Francisco in the Civic Center. There are also opportunities to work at the federal courthouse in Oakland as well as San Jose. So you might consider your own geographical preferences and apply accordingly. There's also a bankruptcy court up in Santa Rosa. So for any of you who live in the North Bay, I would encourage you to look there. And actually, one of our alums is a bankruptcy judge in Santa Rosa, and he's always happy to get applications from Golden Gate students. So for those of you who live north of the city, you might actually consider looking up there for an opportunity. And I would imagine he doesn't get the same volume of applications that the judges here in San Francisco do, so it's a nice way to stand out. There's also a pro se court or pro se department part of the district court. So for those of you who have an interest in habeas corpus or dealing with prisoner cases, prisoners alleging violations of their civil rights or questions about their confinement, there is a department set aside to analyze those cases. And that's quite interesting work as well. And so I would encourage you to consider that. Okay, so that's here, okay, so we talked about this. So looking at the trial level on the state court scheme, as you know, we have these 2 parallel schemes. Every county has a superior court, and many of those judges hire students as externs. The experience at state court is a little bit less predictable than what we see at federal court, because the judges have such different dockets and assignments at state court. So at state court, at least in San Francisco, we see they tend to specialize so that we have a family law department, and they only hear family law matters in that department. And we have a law and motion department, which hears all the pre-trial matters. And then we have trial judges to whom cases are referred once they're ready to go to trial. We have judges who focus on civil, and we have other judges who handle criminal law matters. So if you have these very specialized interests, you might be strategic in how you apply and apply directly to those judges, depending on your interests. The law and motion department and family law departments have staff attorneys there who can supervise your work, much like the law clerks at federal court. So if you like that idea of having somebody you can go to who can supervise you and guide you, those are good departments to look at. If you want to work directly for the judge, you might consider working for a trial judge. They don't have staff attorneys in their chambers, so often it is you and the judge. And that can be an amazing experience if your judge is a good mentor and good supervisor and takes you under their wing and you're comfortable and can really make the most out of that experience. But you also want to recognize that that judge is going to be very busy, may not be as available to you because he or she might be on the bench and doing the things that judges do. But our students who have worked directly for the judges, by and large, have a wonderful experience. The pace at Superior Court tends to be much quicker than at the district court. You're not necessarily writing lengthy memos. Judges need answers quickly. It's a much higher volume of cases. So you might see a lot more stuff and maybe drill a lot, maybe just not as deeply on any one particular issue because there's just so much that has to get done. So anyway, so you might consider that. Again, consider where you're located. There are superior courts in every county. And so if you are located outside of San Francisco, you might find that the judges in your particular community are happy to hear from you because they don't hear from that many students otherwise. San Francisco tends to hear from a lot of law students, as you might imagine. So those are just a couple considerations at the trial level. From there, we advance up to the appellate level, and we are fortunate to be here in San Francisco where we have appellate courts for both the state and federal systems. So on the federal side, we have the Ninth Circuit. They're just down the street at Mission and 7th, and I will just put in a little plug right now. We are doing a program called Catching a Glimpse into Law Practice, and we are taking a group of 1Ls to go visit the Ninth Circuit Courthouse on Friday, February 10th, I believe it is. So if you have not signed up for that visit, log into LCS Online and sign up. Space is limited. It's a great way to see the courthouse, learn about the externship opportunities, just learn about the court in general. So I highly encourage that. So at the Ninth Circuit, there are two kinds of opportunities. One is to work directly in a judge's chambers as a chambers extern. And for those, again, you would apply directly to those particular judges. They also have something called the Office of Staff Attorneys, which is a centralized almost like a law firm within the courthouse, and they analyze cases that come before the court that don't necessarily need to be heard by the 3-judge panel. So a lot of the cases there are decided on the papers, maybe because they're not presenting a novel issue of law, the area of law is well decided, there might not be a constitutional right to that kind of review. So they're analyzing a lot of that work without the parties coming in for oral argument. And instead, what will happen is that the staff attorneys and the externs who work on those cases will meet with a panel of the three appellate judges, and the extern gets to present a case to the panel to say, judges, here are what the parties are saying, here's what they're claiming happened in the lower court, we've done our research, we recommend you grant or deny, the appeal for these reasons. And so you end up having that exchange with the judges, if you're so lucky to have it work out that way, rather than the attorneys for the parties doing that. So that's quite a heady experience, as you can imagine. But if you're working in the Office of Staff Attorneys, you don't otherwise have access to the judges. You're working with the other attorneys, not working directly for the judges. It's a great office and a really great experience. We have a student working there right now, and I encourage you to look into that opportunity. On the state side, we have the California Courts of Appeals. There are 6 districts throughout the state of California. So again, if you're looking at Southern California or Sacramento or other parts of the state, there are other courthouses for the appellate level in California. For those courts, you would apply directly to the various justices to whom you wish to apply. And at the state level, we call our appellate judges justices. On the federal level, we still call them judges. It's a little confusing, but you want to get it right. So again, it's much more in-depth research. The pace is slower. You might be given one assignment that you're working on for quite a long period of time. So if you like doing that in-depth writing and research, really struggling with an issue for a while, looking at it every which way and being very thorough with your research, that's a great experience for you. If you're the kind of person who likes lots of different, a lot of variety and things to move very quickly, may not be the best fit. So part of this is figuring out what the best fit for you is, but I would highly encourage you to consider the various justices here at the Court of Appeals. At the Supreme Court level, on the federal side, unfortunately, the U.S. Supreme Court does not take judicial externs, so we'll have to wait for later opportunities later in your career. But the good news is the California Supreme Court is located here in San Francisco over the Civic Center, and they do take externs. And so I would encourage you to consider applying directly to these state Supreme Court justices for potential externships as well. They often prefer students who are a little bit more advanced in law school, so 2Ls and 3Ls, but we've had students in HLP where it's their first experience working for Supreme Court justices. And so if you have strong credentials and you think you can make a good impression on those justices, I encourage you to apply. But you might also decide that that's something you want to work up towards. Maybe do one of the other externships first, and then as a second experience, apply to the state Supreme Court. But they will look at students for those opportunities. I encourage you to do that. Okay, one other area that I want to highlight, because these are really not on students' radar screens, and those are the administrative court opportunities. And that's the two columns to the right of the chart that we've given you. So I first talked about judicial courts. Those are the courts we all know about. But within the executive branch of government, we have these sort of administrative courts, which are quasi-courts. And there are a lot of regulatory schemes and statutory schemes where parties have to bring their disputes within these administrative courts before they can get to a judicial court. Or maybe instead, maybe this is their entire remedy is going through this administrative court. So the functions are very similar. You are helping the administrative law judges review the cases, do that kind of legal research, prepare draft opinions, same skill set, same kind of work. But these courts tend to be very specialized. So in San Francisco, we have the Immigration Court, which is part of the U.S. Department of Justice, and is listed on here as the Executive Office for Immigration Review. That's the Immigration Court. The U.S. Department of Labor has an administrative law court. They're also just down the street at Mission and 7th. They've taken a lot of our students over the years. On the state side, you might consider the State Bar Court. They handle cases involving attorney misconduct. Very interesting cases. Learn now what you want to avoid. Those actually are quite interesting cases. There's also an office in Oakland, the Office of Administrative Hearings, which hears a whole variety of administrative hearings for different California state agencies. And so those are just a few of the administrative courts here. If you're looking in other locations, some of these courts might be there, and there might be other agencies that have an administrative court there as well. There are plenty in Washington, D.C., so if any of you are interested in D.C. and have a specialized focus, come chat with us, because there might be an administrative law court in your area of interest, and that would be great experience and a great way to build some expertise very early on, is to do an internship there. So, yes?
I thought administrative judges don't go to law school. Is that correct?
No, they're lawyers. In most cases, administrative law judges are lawyers. Yeah.
I think there's a group of judges that don't go to law school that are administrative judges that do practice arbitration and.
So there are, so you might be thinking of folks who do alternative dispute resolution, who do arbitration and mediation, and many or most of those folks are lawyers, but they don't necessarily have to be.
Right.
And I didn't answer your earlier question about commissioners. So on the state level, at the trial courts hire commissioners, much like the federal court hires magistrates. And so they serve as judicial officers and are delegated almost all the same responsibilities that a judge would have. And so we tend to see them a lot of times in family law, sometimes in youth law, sometimes criminal law, different areas where the court needs additional resources. So it's worthwhile to apply to the commissioners as well as to the judges at any given court. I would consider all of those opportunities. Okay, so that was a mouthful. And I really just sketched these out. We have the websites here. But these kinds of decisions, we recommend you come in and meet with me and Leora, and we can talk to you more about your interests, your temperament, the kinds of experiences we know our students are getting at different courts to help you figure out how do you want to tailor your applications. You can't apply to every single judge out there, so it's helpful to make some choices at the outset about where you want to focus your energy.
But I would also say don't discount any one particular experience, regardless of how prestigious you might think it is. Golden Gate students, as I'm sure Suzanne can bear me out on this subject, have worked at all of these courts at all levels, and your opportunities to work there are just depend entirely on how strong your application is and how much you really want and are passionate about it.
And frankly, if I can just say, we chat frequently with the supervisors of our students. We actually go do site visits and we talk with them, and the supervisors at the courts here love our students. They love Golden Gate students. You come well prepared, you're hardworking, you're smart, you're engaged, you ask good questions, you're responsible, you're professional. So your predecessors have set a really good path for all of you, and I would encourage you to aim high and really seek out these opportunities because they are all within your reach.
Any questions about that, I think, briefly? I thought I'd take a minute to talk to you a little bit about the term externship, as it's the title of the program, and give you a sense of how that differs from actually volunteering for a judge or otherwise working for a judge. The term externship is a unique term that Golden Gate has a specific definition for. It basically means that you're obtaining credit for your work experience. You're not getting paid, you're not volunteering, you're obtaining academic credit. The experience is the same, but there are some eligibility requirements for externships that you should be aware of. First, in order to obtain credit, there's a minimum GPA minimum unit requirement. You need to have completed at least 40 units before you can take a judicial externship. In other words, 4 credit. You also need to have a minimum GPA. For state trial courts, that minimum GPA is 2.5. For state appellate courts and federal courts, that minimum GPA is 2.75. And that's a requirement for all required courses. It's a GPA requirement for all required courses.
Right, and so this is just if you want to do it for units. So you can volunteer this summer for a court, and these GPAs don't apply. Those are our internally imposed GPA requirements if you want to take the class, but you should feel free to apply to the judges.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And students work for judges at all times throughout the year, just whether or not they obtain credit is whether or not these requirements apply. Yes?
How many units is the HLP summer again?
The HLP summer, like this first summer.
Isn't it 13?
Yeah, it's a full semester, but for HLP students, when you do your
Step is
first
9.
placement in the fall, right, step is 9, I think. For HLP students, when you do your first placement in the fall, you're not eligible to do it for units. So we do have a lot of HLP students who will work for the court, doing full-time judicial externships. They're simply not earning units because HLP students are not earning units for any of their placements in the fall.
So just to clarify, if you're talking about the fall apprenticeship for HLPers,
Okay.
the eligibility requirements don't need to be met because you're not obtaining credit for those. You're not obtaining academic credit for your fall
So one
apprenticeship.
else can't do externships then because they don't have 40 units?
Exactly. They need to complete their 40 units before they can get credit for their judicial work. They can still volunteer,
Right.
but they can't get academic credit.
Okay.
And many students, as Suzanne just said, do volunteer for courts and judges. Yes.
If an HLP student was going to volunteer, would they also have to do an additional internship? Or does that count as the fall internship?
It would count. It would count, and in fact, there are students who are taking the judicial externship course now who've decided to stay and work with their judge through the spring from their HLP apprenticeship. So they've gone from a full-time schedule to a part-time schedule. And then their part-time work, they're obtaining academic credit for it, so they've enrolled in the judicial externship class.
Okay.
More
And-
particulars on that.
Yeah, and just to be clear, so for your first HLP apprenticeship, you're not earning credits, no matter where you're working. Whether you're working at a law firm, government, court, public interest, you're not earning. So that piece is not unique to the judicial piece.
So, back in terms of eligibility requirements, to get academic credit for a judicial externship, as I said, you need to have completed 40 units. You need to meet the GPA requirement. You also need to attend course meetings that are held throughout the semester in which you're taking your judicial externship. There are 3 course meetings, one at the beginning, one at the middle, one at the end. There's more of a 3-step process for obtaining a judicial externship. You are advised to find your placement at least 1 semester in advance. So again, if you're looking for something for next spring, you'd probably start at the beginning of the fall semester. This fall semester. You secure the placement, and then you actually register for the course, and you submit an application that's available on the registrar's website, or LCS online, or LCS. Another requirement in order to get academic credit for a judicial externship is to have taken or be concurrently taking evidence. That's something that's going to come up a lot in your externship. To determine how many credits you can get academic credit for, you need to sort of adhere to the following calculation. 45 hours in a semester equals 1 unit. So in other words, if you were working, if you wanted to get 10 credits, you'd have to work 450 hours in that semester to obtain credit for that amount. With that in mind, I'll tell you that there's a 13-unit limit on all externships prior to matriculation. So you're not able to get more than 13. So that's something you think about. You might want to think about as you calibrate how many credits you want to take in your externship. Some students do decide to work more than the credits that they're earning simply because that's the way that they'll see that they'll get value out of that experience, and they want to make sure that they have more externship credits to spend later on. Does that make sense? As I said, the class meets 3 times in a semester. The first class takes place before the semester begins. Any questions about externships?
And so one thing, so for now, most of you are not eligible to earn units, but soon enough you will be. And everything else in terms of the process and the kinds of opportunities applies to all of you. One thing we like to do is, as Leora said, we meet right before the semester begins, right before students start their placements. And so we will like to invite one else who might be volunteering for the court to come join us for that class meeting, even if they're not actually earning the unit. So you get the benefit of that orientation and training. So we hope that you will be staying in touch with us as you move through this process, so we can help you and coach you on your applications and coach you on your interviews. And then if we know that you have lined up a position even as a volunteer, we can invite you to come join us for that class. So,
and during that first class, we talk about the standard of review, good writing for a judge, and that's why it's good to stay in touch with us about that. So if you're 1L considering volunteering for a judge this summer, stay in touch with us about that. And also HL peers, to the extent you decide to spend your fall apprenticeship working for a judge, we encourage you to come check in and attend that first class of the externship just so you can get the benefit of the training we offer there.
So I want to talk a little bit more about the actual mechanics of how to apply and where do you look, where do you find the resources. And we have a student who has just done a judicial externship who is here, and she'll talk about her experience as well. But let me sort of walk you through some of the mechanics, show you where you can find the information you need to work on your applications. So a couple of things with your applications. Most externship applications consist of 5 pieces: resume, cover letter, writing sample, reference list, and transcript. So all of the documents that you're pulling together you will need for these applications. And typically you send a separate application to each judge or each department to whom you wish to apply. I do recommend applying to several. You don't want to just write to one judge and wait for the magic to happen. I mean, you want to put several things out there. Some judges move pretty quickly, so you might want to prioritize the judges you're most interested, get those out first, and then follow with the second wave of applications. But you do want to get them out. And for summer, the positions are pretty competitive because it has become quite popular for a lot of 1Ls to volunteer for the courts. And so we find we have students from outside of the Bay Area who want to spend the summer here, and they are also applying for positions here. So I would encourage you to apply, get your stuff in early. If for whatever reason it's not clicking, I would encourage you to apply again for fall or spring or whatever the next opportunity for you is. We find actually during the semesters that's a great opportunity for us because all those students go back to where they came from, go back to whatever school they're going to, and really then just the local students are taking advantage of those opportunities during the fall and spring. So, you want to you want to make sure at some point while you're here that you do this opportunity. If you can get it as your first opportunity, that's great. But if it doesn't happen first, consider it for a subsequent internship. So, and then for HLP folks, just to note in terms of the application process, we do have a separate process to sort of streamline the applications a bit, and Jared will be in touch with all of you to let you know what that process is, and we'll talk to you more about that, but you will still need all those same documents. So it's still worth your time to start researching the judges, start assembling your materials, and then he'll be in touch with that process. I want to show you a couple of online resources where you can go to find information about the different courts and judges. So first, I'm going to show you on LCS Online some of the tools that we have there to help you out. So I've already given you a lot of websites, and you'll notice some courts talk about their externships and some don't. But I'll show you some resources on LCS Online. So one place to get court websites and contact information for the various judges is to look where we have information about our externships. So if you look under Browse Employers, and then here you'll see practice areas and clinics, and if you pull down this menu, you'll see we actually have a link here for Judicial Externship. And if you click on that and search, you will get a list. These are, we have listings for all the different courts in the Bay Area. And if you click on the courts, so the first appellate district is located here in San Francisco. And so we'll have information, contact information for the different justices there. Some general information about how to research externships. And if you go back, you'll also see we gave you the URL directly for so here you'll see the websites for all the different courts. So you might take a look here because this may help streamline things a little bit. The judges tend to shift over time. So for example, in San Francisco, they rotate the assignments of the judges. Some judges retire, new judges are elected or appointed. So it's helpful to keep your eye on the court websites because this is a changing landscape, and so you want to make sure you know who you're applying to and that they're still on the bench and that sort of thing. So anyway, so take a look here, and that will give you some good information. You can also take a look to get some evaluations from students who have worked for judges in the past. So I'm back here at the home page, and if you click on this yellow link for the employment evaluations, and click here where it has the archive, you will see a list of all, well, here you can search. And I would not put too many terms in here. I did a search earlier just for judicial. And you will see, maybe about 20 students who have uploaded evaluations of their experience. And often they give you their name and their contact information. And so you can click on this, read about the student's experience. What did they do there? Did they like it? Would they recommend it? Why would they recommend it? If they have their contact information, you can reach out to that student to say, hey, I'm thinking about applying for a position with your judge. Can I chat with you about that? That may actually be great because in your cover letter you might say, dear judge, having spoken with your former extern, Jane Smith, I'm even more excited about the opportunity. Or Jane could call the judge and put in a good word for you and say, Judge, I think Jane would be, or this student would be a great fit for you. So I do encourage you to network with other GGU students. We've seen that to be very successful in terms of creating opportunities. So make sure you read the evaluations to figure out who those students are. Also, if you chat with us, we can tell you about other students who have worked at different courts. They just may not have remembered to upload their evaluations. So we can link you to those students as well. As I mentioned earlier, the courts obviously have websites. I do want to point out a couple things about the Northern District of California. So this is the local federal court. They have information for externs on their website. So if you go to their website and you look over here where it says career opportunities, and then you'll scroll down, they actually have a link, applying for judicial externships, and they'll provide you with some information about externships. The local federal court has a policy that they only want to hear from one else after your first semester grades are in, which we have our grades, so that's great, so I would encourage you to apply. They also have a policy of not contacting one else for interviews until February 1st. So this is a good time to be getting your applications in. I would try as much as you can to get stuff in over the next week if you're looking for summer positions with the court, so that when they do start contacting students for interviews next week, you're in that mix of students that they're considering. Yes?
When should you start applying if you want a fall externship?
Soon thereafter, I mean, I would think by February, March, and again, depends on the judges. If they fill up quickly for summer, they might be ready to move right on to fall. And so it's hard, you know, they don't publish deadlines. It's, yeah.
Is this, if you're volunteering and not doing the externship, would you still apply for the year?
Yes, so whether you're doing it for units is of no concern to the courts or judges. That's about your relationship with us. From the judge's perspective, it's all the same. They'll still call it a judicial externship, and you're still volunteering, which any student is, and so they don't really care. I mean, they might, but really it's the same thing, same process. Whether you're doing units is just between you and the school, whether you're getting academic credit for it. So the federal court here does have an actual application. I just want to show you, it's an online application. So they will expect you to fill all this stuff out, which you can just copy and paste from your resume. And then if you scroll down to the very end, they will list all the judges in the 3 courthouses here in the Bay Area. And it will tell you, I don't know if you can see this, but some judges prefer paper applications, others prefer this online form. So just read what it says here. If the judges you want to apply to prefer paper, send paper. If they prefer the online form, do the online form. The online form doesn't allow you to submit anything else. You're just filling in that sort of resume thing. So often the chambers will contact you afterwards if they like what they see to say, can you now please send me these other documents? So you do want to have that stuff ready to go in case the court requests that you send it to them directly. Yes?
For the transcript, can it be unofficial?
Yes, so for the transcript, we recommend you use our unofficial grade sheet template, which you can find on LCS Online. It's a Word document, so you want to have your actual transcript in front of you and fill out that document. You want to quadruple check it, make sure it's perfect, because you really don't want to get anything wrong with your credentials ever, but definitely not with the court. And I will also refer you guys to the LCS blog, because I just put a post up there about how to calculate your rank accurately and how to present your GPA accurately. So please take a look at that to make sure there are no problems in that area. This is the only court I know of that has this sort of online application form. For most other courts, you're just sending a traditional packet of information to the judge. And you can just address it to the judge at the courthouse, and the judge's staff will review it and make decisions about who to interview. There are other resources that you can use to research the judges, and we do recommend that you try to personalize it if you can. You know, we have profiles in our office of all the different judges in California, so kind of like a little bio of the judges, and that can be very useful to you. You might read cases. Maybe if you're going on an interview, this might be more appropriate then. Maybe read some of their cases if they have published opinions. You can search in Lexis and Westlaw in the legal press for articles that mention the judge. There's often not a lot in the mainstream press, but you'll find a lot of articles in the legal press. For those of you looking out of town, you might read the legal press of those particular communities to learn more about the judges that you're considering, just to see if they've done something high profile, or are they controversial, you know, kind of get a flavor for who they are. In your letters, you do want to be careful while you want to talk about why you want to work for that judge or for that court. You don't want to cross the line. Judges are impartial, so you would never want to say, I want to work for you, judge, because we share the same political views. Or I see you were appointed by President so-and-so, and I vote for that president, and therefore we might, you know, they are impartial, they review the cases that are presented to them. And so to connect with them about ideology, perspective, political orientation may not be the best bet. Maybe if they've worked for an organization that you have an affiliation with, or their career path looks like what you hope yours will look like, I mean, you can talk about those things, but I'd be really careful about that. You know, it's a bit of a struggle. You know, when you're writing to an organization who shares your values, it's much easier. Here you do need to be a bit more circumspect.
And on that note, I might say definitely look at the judicial profiles that are published by the local periodicals, and that we catalog in our office, because those are really detailed personal profiles about, you know, where people went to school, where they're from, there's certain dispositions about things, and there might be things that you can tease out of those profiles to draw connections between you and the judge.
Right, and also the evaluations, I understand you're a great mentor, or that you take a lot of time with your student externs, or, there are ways you can connect with them that show you're writing to that judge without crossing that line. So that's just a quick overview. As you come in and meet with us, we can direct you to resources that are more focused on the things that you're considering, and if you're not sure, we can sort of walk you through that process. But we at least wanted you to get a sense of the landscape. And as I said, for the federal positions, if you're looking for summer, I would aim to have applications ready, ideally within the next week. So I recommend you come in, show us a resume and a cover letter. We want to make sure everything is perfect. While we tell you legal employers don't tolerate typos and mistakes, it is especially true for the court. You are going to be writing work to be presented directly to a judge, and possibly even to be presented to the external world by the judge. So the standards are extremely high. You have to get it right. Your materials need to be well organized and thoughtful and polished, and we want to make sure that your stuff is just that. So make sure we're taking a look at it and giving you some feedback. I do want to invite Milo to talk. I don't know if you have anything else to add to that. So what I'd like to do now, turn off this screen, is introduce Milo Beitman. Yeah, come on up, Milo, and I'll get over there. So Milo worked for U.S. Magistrate Judge Maria Elena James. So she can tell you a little bit about what it's like to work for a magistrate, and just what you did there, maybe some of the responsibilities that you had. Okay, sure.
So my the application process was different for me. I took Judge James for evidence in the summer after my first year. So I didn't have to go through this same process. I wasn't even really sure I wanted to work for a judge, but I really connected with her just as a professor. So if for any of you who do happen to take her for summer evidence, if she's teaching, I'm not sure. I think probably what got me the job is that I put it in a nice folder on my materials. So maybe it was some of the stuff in it, but just as Suzanne was saying, just sort of how you present it, I think is really important, and make sure that it's all polished. So Judge James is at the federal district court. She's an Article 1 judge, so she's not Article 3. And those are the kinds of things, for example, when I went to the interview, I was asked if I knew what a magistrate judge was and what the difference was. And so that was what I looked up ahead of time, because I anticipated that kind of question. So think about when you're looking at what kind of judge, what that means, what kind of responsibilities they may have versus other judges, and anticipate those kinds of questions for the interview. So some of the responsibilities I had with her, and the difference is that she's not appointed, she's appointed by other judges. She's not appointed through the same legislative process. And so there's different types of cases that she covers. It's a lot of preliminary proceedings. And if a defendant, for example, gives her jurisdiction, or plaintiff, both parties have to decide to give jurisdiction. So some of the things that I covered in working with her were Social Security cases, ERISA violations, and some patent violations. And I was responsible for writing the memos for some of those that were brief memos to give to the judge and to orally brief her on before it came before her. And some of those I was actually writing the brief that was going to be handed down as the judgment. And so you'll get, and also I think it's important that when you're in the position that you have the role with them as an extern, say what's important to you, what matters, what you'd like to see. And a lot of times the clerks that you're working with will try to hand you, they have a number of things across their desk, and they'll hand you things that maybe is of interest to you, and you can get more experience in that. And ultimately that also then will become a writing sample for you as you continue on in your legal career. So I think that's kind of the basic broad overview of how I got there and what I did there. I don't know if you guys have other questions.
How did you manage your time? Like, how is the time versus doing well in school?
So I chose to use up a good number of my credits, externship credits to be there. So Judge James required a minimum of 20 hours versus other externships I had 10 or 15. So I felt like that was a chunk of time. So I did 7 units which was approximately what it came to with 14 weeks of 20 hours a week. And then I took 2 other classes to get, I think, 13 or 14 credits for full-time. And that was for me. For other students, I know students who did a full load and still did the 20 hours and worked there, or didn't take credit at all, and maybe had a little bit less, maybe took 12 units or something like that. I think you have to, in that case, I would suggest the most strategic thing is to think about, I have 13 credits I can use. And mind you, those are credits you're paying to work somewhere and taking away from other classes you might want that are either required, that are helpful for the bar, or for a certificate, or whatever your interests are, and sort of trying to navigate. I use 7 there and 3 for another externship, and I'm not using the other 3 because there are other classes I really wanted to take before I graduate.
That's one of the benefits of using externship credits, because if you're actually using them, then your corresponding class schedule is smaller. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And I would also encourage you to work with the folks in Law Student Services, because they do that sort of academic planning. You haven't had the opportunity yet to really need that yet, but as you start making choices about classes and internships and externships and how will it all fit, and do I need to save some units for this purpose or that purpose, they can help you navigate through all that.
Yeah, I mean, I would say every semester I had a option 1, 2, and 3 with a schedule for the remaining semesters I had up until graduation, just to sort of figure out kind of what the best way to go to navigate.
Or can you talk also about on the job, kind of what your schedule was like? Did you have lots of assignments? Did you have enough time to get things done? Maybe how much interaction you had with the judge and with the clerks?
Yeah, and obviously each chambers will be different. I know in my externship class there was one student who every breakfast and lunch they had with the judge and the clerks. And then there are some that get almost no interaction with the judge. And I think I was probably somewhere in between. And it just depends on also what their calendar is, if they're criminal calendar or regular civil calendar at that point. I mostly worked with the clerks. There were 2 clerks. I worked with the judge probably a third of the time on projects that she maybe handed to me. She was very approachable. It just I didn't have a lot of one-on-one time with her. And I think I wish I had, and I think it just depends on their schedule, what their calendar is at that time. So I think in terms of my 20 hours there, it was for her, for example, she had her calendar met every Thursday. So that was a requirement, and those are things that maybe other judges will have too. And you'll have to figure out your schedule around that. So I had to pick courses that didn't conflict with that Thursday requirement, or I wouldn't have been eligible to work there with her. And so in terms of the projects, some projects I'd be handed and the judge would say, yeah, this shouldn't take too long, I just need this by the end of the day. It turns out it took, my whole day and the next day, and so some things end up being a lot more complicated than you think. And when they say jump, you say how high. So I think, if in those cases, that meant I had to work all day on that, and I had to push to the side other responsibilities that I had. Other times I was given several weeks to work on one project because it was important that I had every citation correct, because this was going out as a final order, and you can't have one period in the wrong place. And you're going over the same document 10, 15 times before it's handed in, and then maybe 10 more times after that. So yeah, other than that, I mean, we were given a lot of leeway to go see other cases. There was one of the largest gang trials happening in the federal district court at that time. And so a couple of us went down and watched that, and that was a great experience. And while I was there, she had one trial that was a slander case, which is pretty rare nowadays. And so that was really interesting to watch, and to sort of be responsible for telling her if there was any evidentiary concerns or questions that she had. But that doesn't happen all too often with magistrate judges. So that's something to keep in mind. If you want to see a lot of trials, district court judges may be better than magistrate judges. Oh.
Yeah, did you feel competent going in, or were you nervous, or how did you learn what you were supposed to do?
That's a
and
bad
feel
question
comfortable
for me.
doing it?
I was nervous. I was nervous. I didn't. It's hard to feel confident when you're working for people who have been doing this for a really long time, but they understand that, and you all go in wanting to learn, and they understand this is a learning process, and they really work you through it. I mean, I can't speak for every judge and every clerk, but I can definitely, from my experience, the clerks really understood that you're there to learn, and I feel like they really helped you along the way and taught you how. I mean, there's a lot of it is independent, and you're working on your own, but I think they assist you in getting through it. And you, by the end, I think you do feel confident.
There are students, I think, and Suzanne will bear me out on this, that I've seen come in as first years and they apply for these judicial positions, and then you see them, you know, a year or so later, and it's like they completely blossomed. It's completely mature. Their confidence level has soared, and it's because in some of these positions, certainly you're given a lot of work, a lot of responsibility, and you're told that it has to happen now. And some people really shine in those kinds of experiences, and even others. Even when the case isn't incredibly heavy, even when the work product that you're producing isn't always being put into an order of some kind, the confidence that you get from being from working on those kinds of from that level, it has just had a tremendous impact on some students.
And also keep in mind that it's law students who get these assignments, right? It's who do these externships. It's not attorneys who've been practicing for 10 years coming in as judicial externs. So the supervisors have experience working with other law students. They know what a 1L can do, they know what a 2L can do. They have a sense of what you've been doing in law school, what other students who've come before you have done. So generally they have pretty good expectations about what you can do, what might be a bit of a stretch, which is a great stretch, you know, reach for those things. But they you know, I mean, one of the clerks that Milo worked for has been doing this for a long time. So they don't have crazy expectations about what you can do. Maybe one more and then we need to wrap it up. Is there one more question? All right. Yeah, so thank you, Milo, for sharing your experience.